I'm with Zoe Barnett today. She is an SEO strategist and professional copywriter who works with creatives, photographers, and service-based businesses. Welcome, Zoe. I'm so delighted to have you here, and I can't wait to talk about copywriting.
Hi Zoe, thank you so much for having me.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and how you got into copywriting?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a website copywriter and SEO strategist. And I come from a corporate marketing background. A few years ago, I decided, hang on a sec, I think I can go and do this myself. Started off in a very general marketing background, but realized I've always loved words. So transitioned more into copywriting. And obviously, a big part of website copywriting is the SEO side. So that is where I am today.
Yeah, well, we're going to dig into that because I know that photographers in my community and overall in the genre really can struggle with copywriting because they're fantastic at obviously the visual side of it, creating beautiful images, but sometimes, you need more help with marketing those beautiful images. So, of course, for the benefit of those photographers who might be thinking, yes, I need to get some copywriting tips. How can I actually convey the value and the passion I have behind my work? How would you advise a photographer who's struggling with writing copy that's really going to speak to their ideal client? What would be like a quick tip or tips that you might be able to share? And I'm presuming we want to get across our personalities and obviously our unique take on the world and our approach to photography. But can you tell us a bit more about how you might tune into a photographer's voice and recommend that they tap into that in their copy?
Yeah, and of course there's a lot to unpack there. And website copy is, I think, the biggest thing, even me just listening to you then, I think the task of writing copy feels so overwhelming because what usually happens is a photographer comes along, and photographers are naturally creative visual people, and they think, right, I want a really fantastic website. So it's usually just a couple of avenues. You get a template, there's lots of great free templates, or you invest in a template, or maybe you work with a website designer, you hire someone to do your website, and then all of a sudden you think, you're in this process of building your website or maybe rebuilding your website, and you think, right, I've got to now fill this with words. So either your website designer says, where's your copy? I need your copy. Or you are doing it yourself. You're, filling it within a template. And the biggest challenge is it tends to be overwhelm. And you think, right, I've got to think about brand voice. I've got to think about
Yeah.
um, headlines. I've got to think about SEO, and there's so much to think about. So in terms of like one tip to banish that overwhelm, though there's not a magic cure, but the thing I would say is break the task down. When you underestimate what's involved with writing website copy, if you think it's something that you can just chuck together in a day or, spend a few evenings doing, I'd love to say it was that easy, but you're actually making it more difficult for yourself. But if you can break the task down, give yourself a month to work on it and break it down into the phases that's needed, that is when it becomes less overwhelming and actually manageable to create the copy that you need to strategically attract those ideal clients that you want to work with.
That's great advice. And actually, that's true for everything, isn't it? If we get overwhelmed, gosh, to think about it in a more granular fashion, that's a great tip. And I can totally see that, having written my own website in the past and rewritten
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's a huge task, isn't it? So you would, I guess, then be suggesting that you approach one page at a time. So are you thinking homepage first, about page next, services page? How would you kind of approach it?
Yeah, so that's the traditional way to approach website copy. What I do as a professional copywriter, and I actually do this when I work one-on-one with clients, is we use the homepage as like the North Star, your guiding star. So if you can nail the homepage, if you can get that right, then that is going to help you write all your interior pages. So, your about page, your services page, contact page. This is where you really want to spend your energy. And this is where you want to be really clear on your messaging and your brand voice and the strategy of your website. And by the strategy of your website, I mean, how is it actually going to work? How is it going to flow? How are you going to direct people to one key sales page? Are you going to have a main service? Are you going to have secondary services? If you can map that out, so you can write your homepage and then map out all these things, what's my message? What's my brand voice? What's my website strategy? Then everything else is going to flow on from that. So yes, definitely start with the homepage.
Right. Okay. I know what you mean by brand voice, but let's break that down for people. So brand voice, what is that? A lot of photographers are obviously independent, they're working on their own. So arguably their brand voice, you could say, is their natural voice as they speak, because they are the business owner in the face of the business. But could you just sort of elaborate on that term and explain what you mean a bit more, just in case people aren't clear on that, and also how you would define it if you're unclear?
Yeah, and I think, how you've described it there, Zoe, is perfect because it shouldn't be something that's overcomplicated. And I think when it is overcomplicated, that's when it becomes a bit wishy-washy. So I'll explain. A brand voice is essentially the words that you use, how you talk, how you come across to your ideal client. And the easiest way to do that is to be authentic. And by authentic, because that's another word that gets bandied
Bit more,
around.
yeah, used a lot, isn't it, that word?
And it's easier said than done because we say being authentic and then you're sat there thinking, oh gosh, what do I type? What do I write? And you want to get that authenticity perfect, which totally takes away from authenticity. So what I mean is by being authentic is lean into a version of you that you know is your best self when you're with a client that is your ideal client. And the reason I say it in that way is kind of take the pressure off a little bit. So, I'm as a copywriter and you yourself, I'm a business owner, I'm a creative business owner. And I know when I'm speaking to an ideal client because I know that I speak their language and that we click. And we've all been in those scenarios where you just click with someone and you know that it's going to be a really good working relationship. And whether you are a wedding photographer, a nature photographer, a brand photographer, you will have felt, or you would have at least had, even if it's not converted into a sale, you may have had situations in networking where you're speaking to someone thinking, gosh, I could really help this person, I could really help this business. Leaning into that version of your voice is the easiest way to do it. Practically, how to do that is setting some time aside to think about the kind of phraseology and words that you use. And again, don't overthink it. Just think naturally, what would you say to that ideal client? And those words will come to the surface. You'll think about certain words that resonate. You can do things like look through, if you have testimonials, if you have reviews, look at the language, how they've described you, words that they use, and simply even, you could even do this. And I have actually had clients do this where they record conversations back with their clients, their existing clients, and they listen to how they speak. And you can use that to guide yourself. So to tighten up what is already in you. Okay. But the biggest thing is to not overthink it and just be yourself. Talk, like yourself.
Yeah. I think that there was a time when everybody spoke more formally on their websites, and I think that very much is becoming not as popular, and people are being, like you say, their authentic selves on their website, because everyone's understood now that actually we don't need to write in a formal manner like we did at school, how we were taught. You can start a sentence with the word and or because, for example, and all of those kind of rules that the school system taught us are actually no longer relevant, because people want that authentic interaction with certainly an individual that they're about to hire or considering hiring, in this case as a photographer. So yeah, I think that's good for those people who perhaps maybe didn't get on at school. A lot of photographers can really struggle with words, and actually that must be quite a nice thought that actually the rule book doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I read something a while back and it really stuck with me. It said conversational doesn't mean casual. And that really
love that. Yeah.
Because you can, just because you're conversational doesn't take away from your professionalism. It doesn't mean that you're casual about your business. That is something that I've said to clients loads who, maybe do feel more comfortable being in the more formal sphere because maybe that's what they've learned and that's what they've been taught. But actually, what really resonates is when we just speak to people like a real human being, the person that you are.
Yeah. And like you said, I love that idea, because that is so impactful. That's just that phrase that you've just said there. And we do need to be professional. Of course we do. We need to present our services, our products in the best possible light. We need to highlight the benefits and the positives and all the good things that can come from hiring us. But I think, yeah, like you say, it doesn't need to be formal. It doesn't need to be, kind of really naff. It can be done really well if it's conversational. So I love that advice about being conversational, being yourself. And there's some really good tips that you've shared there about recording yourself or listening back to conversations. I think that's really good. How do you work with a client, firstly, to get to know someone's brand voice? Because you're writing on their behalf, of course. So how might you do it? Is the same thing, just conversations, taking notes, listening back, or?
Yeah, so it really starts with, if someone's working with me one-on-one, is the first thing that we do is a workshop, and that's how we start the whole copywriting process. And in that workshop, that is recorded, so I listen back to that. So that's very much like phase one of me kind of understanding what their voice is. There's also obviously the market research. What are the competitors out there saying? What are their clients wanting them to say? Again, looking at the testimonials. And it's very much like a meet in the middle, when we're looking at it from a very strategic point of view. Obviously, if you're going to DIY your copy, if you're going to write your own copy, I would say go out there, get inspiration, look at what others are doing, but lean more heavily into what feels right for you, because that's how you're going to create something that's more authentic and real and actually genuinely you, rather than, copying a competitor. When I'm working with clients, they tend to be more at the stage of their business where they're starting to invest in their business. Maybe their business is hitting, I usually call it like a tipping point, like where,
Yeah.
a photographer knows that they need to invest in their website in order to kind of get to that next level. The process does look different than, the DIY approach. And then we come at it from the market research. So what are people doing in the market? What do people want to hear at the moment? So yeah, that's competitor listening, looking at their websites, competitors' websites, and understanding the terminologies, the words that they're using, trends. Sometimes we don't want to just kind of do everything to be on trend, but there might be certain words that are really resonating in the market. And then that's when I would advise a client, when I am creating the concept for their web copy, they might say, well, I never say that. And I say, well, I don't want 100% of your words to feel like that, but maybe injecting a little bit of this and a little bit of that and start saying it would actually make you resonate more with those kind of clients. So it is really looking very granularly at the words that are being used, the phraseology, and how they use their web copy. So how it's broken down, how it works with the design, the overall experience that builds into everything that kind of creates their brand voice and their messaging, because they and the strategy of the website, because they all interlink. You can't really just do one without the other.
No, that's actually a really important point, because it's all very well writing 300, 400, 500 words for your homepage, coming back to the template and finding, oh, it doesn't fit the design, that the blocks of space you have available don't work. So I know you've got a clever hack, and that is your template in terms of how you might actually be considering the space available as you write. So can you tell us about that? And obviously we worked together recently. If we're recording this in early May 2025, but just back in March we recorded a workshop, didn't we, together, and created a resource. And as part of that, there is a template that Zoe put together, and then there's some PR templates that I put together, and that resource is available. I'll include the link in the show notes. But the template helps with that problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the template, what it's really good for is if you are going out and DIYing your website and obviously DIYing your copy, you know that you can go on ChatGPT, use AI to write your copy. But what AI fails to give you, whilst you can tell it to give you, you can tell it that you're writing copy, it fails to visualize how it may map out on the page. So when we worked together, what I created was a template, a website copy template that considers kind of the flow of the copy and the way that it can work with visual elements and the strategy, therefore, of the website overall. And I don't want to use buzzwords, but strategy is very much like how it flows from one section to the other. Just think about your ideal client on your website and how they navigate around it. So the template is really good for giving you that guidance. Sure, use AI to polish your words and give you inspiration, but essentially what the template does is give you a starting point to say, this is how websites that work. And I don't just say that in any way. This is someone who's written for many websites and worked with designers. This is the formula that works. yes, you might need to customize it. Yes, you may need to change things around, but essentially that template is what is a tried and tested strategy
Yeah.
photography
And
website.
it helps people get the key parts in, isn't it? And I think, you know, that's the risk when you're doing it on your own. You can, like you say, use ChatGPT, churn out a load of copy, but it needs a lot of refining. And like you say, has it actually included all the key elements that you need? So let's talk about if a photographer has got two genres. So perhaps they specialize in weddings as well as family portraits or newborns, for example. How might you suggest a photographer tackle that from a copywriting perspective? We've said earlier about having the homepage being that main page. How might you, not so much structure, because I think that's more about the website design, and I talked actually with Alex Vita about website design in a previous video, but more from the copywriting perspective, how might you approach it if you are a specialist in two or more genres from a copywriting perspective?
Well, it's really nice that you mentioned Alex Vita actually, because I can use an example that him and I collaborated on. So he
Right.
was website designer, I was website copywriter. It was a custom project. So this client, John, who came to Alex initially, was ready to go all in, get a beautiful new website, really, you know, he's at that tipping point. And he had multiple specialities. He was a headshot photographer predominantly, that's kind of what he was known for, but he also did pet photography, family photography, and editorial photography as well. So, you know, there was many different branches and different audiences, because straight away, you know, your pet photography client is going to be completely different to your headshot client. So, and interestingly enough, this is a challenge that's not just in photography, it's across a lot of different niches. So it's something as a copywriter that you have to be well versed at, because interestingly enough, I actually asked ChatGPT once how to approach this, and ChatGPT told me to do separate websites for each niche.
Right,
In an ideal
okay.
world. Okay, maybe in an ideal world, and if you are a big business, you know, you have different brands and different, you know, audiences, and you build the brand around the audience. But we're talking usually micro, small businesses here. It's just
Yeah.
not. So the next best thing is to have individual services pages, you know, obviously for your family photography, for your brand photography. And what you want to do is, again, going back to this homepage, is create messaging that can tie in to all elements. The danger, which sounds a bit dramatic, but the challenge is then having wishy-washy messaging. Because if you're trying to appeal to your brand photography or headshot photography people and your pet photography people, you know, how can you actually put a message together that is gonna resonate with both? So my strategy here is usually to ask, do you have a primary service? If you have a primary service, this is what you kind of want to focus on in that hero section, that main messaging. So in John's case, his messaging was very much about making people feel good, okay, because of headshot photography. But then if you looked at his homepage, you would then go down it and there would be almost like a jokey bit about making people feel good and making granny feel good in the family photography. So it's about having a message that you can dial up and dilute down as well. Okay, so you kind of think
Clever.
main message, and if you can dial it up to your, you know, your pet photography clients or your brand photography, but it's got to feel the same. John's comment at the end of the project was that he was really happy with the cohesive feeling. It felt like him across it all, even though he was talking to different people, even though the messaging did vary depending on the audience. And that is where your brand voice comes in. So yes, you've got different messaging, but as long as your brand voice is cohesive, people are going to know that whether you're talking about you're photographing someone's dog or whether you're photographing, you know, colleagues at somebody's business, then it's the same person and it's still that same overall brand vibe.
Nice. I like that. And I think, yeah, so dialing into what it is that's relevant across all genres, I think is what you're saying essentially,
Yes.
and then get that across in the homepage, but with those additional services pages, which also then allow you to talk more specifically about that niche. And of course, from an SEO perspective, both you and I work in SEO, and copywriting is so important in terms of getting those key phrases in for the relevant area of
Exactly. And
speciality.
what you've got to remember is your services pages are your opportunity to really dial it up. And naturally, if somebody has landed on a website, whether it's, if it's via Google, they might land on that service page anyway, because they're
Yes, if
searching.
it's well optimized, yeah, why not?
Exactly, exactly. If they're going to your homepage, it may be that, they come via your social media, or, maybe they've had a referral. And then even then, if they are looking for something very specific, they are going to navigate to that page, that specific page. So as long as your homepage reassures them straight away that they're in the right place, then they're going to quickly navigate to the right place for them.
And of course, having a great navigation and the menu being very clear so that you can get to where you want to go to. And that, again, we touched on with the interview with Alex, but that is really important. But like you say, we're all quite tech savvy these days and can navigate the sites, presuming they follow that regular format. But let's talk about pages, because I know that about pages can be the second most visited page because people want to find out about you if they've got some interest. Can we talk about the copywriting for about pages? It can be so cringy, can't it? Writing about yourself. I know photographers struggle with this. How can photographers build that sort of trust and connection and appeal, desire for, hiring them without that kind of cringy overload and real salesy type speak as well? And what should they include in an about page? Is it actually about them, or should it more be about the client and the issues that they solve?
So that is a really common phrase that gets bandied around quite a lot in the marketing world, that your about page isn't about you, it's about them. And fundamentally, I agree, but I find that gets people more in a pickle about what to write, because then they're thinking, right, this is my about page, but I'm not allowed to write it about me. It's got to be about them. The simplest way to describe what an about page should do is it should be like sitting down with your ideal client and having a really good conversation with them. And again, having that really, like, you're really engaging to them, they're engaging to you. Your homepage should be about you. It actually should be about you and your business, but it should be the bits that align and resonate with your ideal client, the stuff that's going to make them think, oh, that's interesting, I want to learn more. Practically, how you do that is have a bit of a fun with your about page. I love a fun about page. So if you break it down, the simplest way is beginning, middle, and end. So at the beginning of your about page, strategically, what you want to be doing here is like engaging and nurturing the ideal client. And the reason I say that is, if you look at your homepage, that's where you attract them, you hook them in, you say something that makes them think, right, okay, I want to explore more. When they're on your about page, this is about them wanting to know more about you and your business. They're wanting to know more about you, especially as a photographer, because it's very personal, isn't it? Whoever's going to be photographing you or your subjects, you want to feel is the right person. So that hero section at the top, this is where I say use a statement that's going to resonate with them straight away. Okay. Then when it goes into what is on your about page, this is where you see people just write massive bios or almost have like the CV approach, which is not the best approach. I understand why people do it for ease and getting started. But what you want to do is really think about your story and then how it goes into their story. So for example, if you're a family photographer, it would be a really smart move to pick out bits about your own family life and how that links into you being a family photographer. Again, resonate with your ideal client. If you are a brand photographer, you might want to talk a little bit more about your journey in your business. You want to pick out elements of your own story. And a lovely tip that I like to share is start in the middle. So you don't need to start right at the beginning of the story, but think about a poignant point in your own story that's going to resonate with your ideal client. It could be something that's personal to you, and then build that out on your about page. You can also include really simple things like testimonials are great on an about page. I like really fun things like picking out your 5 favorite things, a snapshot of something personal like your dog, like John, the client I was talking about before. We use like a silly picture of his dog. Things like that can, depending on your approach, can be really fun. And then obviously really clear call to actions. Tell them what to do at the end of the about page, tell them where to go next, because they've read a load about you, they like you, and now they're going to continue.
Yeah, I'm glad you've touched on call to actions actually, because that's a key part of the copywriting piece, isn't it? Like ultimately you can write all this amazing copy, but if you're not driving them to a different page or a contact form, that's a lost opportunity. So let's talk briefly about call to actions and how can photographers move forward from just saying click here. I see that a lot. How can we convey our brand voice again in those call to action buttons, and how important is that?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a couple of things to consider. So I've also seen over-egged call to action. So it can go both ways, where people try to be really quirky and really interesting, and then the call to actions just become a bit too much. Usually what you want to be going for is simplicity. So it's absolutely okay to say like head this way or whatever sounds natural to your voice. But also what I would say is be very specific call to actions and make sure it's clear what the call to action is actually for. So you could have a call to action that says head here, but then they don't actually know why they're heading here. So have you told them in the copy? You know, sometimes it can just be a really little line of copy that says, want to get started, and then the button says apply here. So it's very clear why they're pressing that button. If you think about yourself exploring a website, we want to explore it as quickly as possible. So giving people very clear navigation with the call to actions really helps. But yeah, using your brand voice. Micro copy is what we call it for button copy. So this is all about, you know, making them fun. What I would say is that's a really lovely editing task. So write your copy, have fun with it, and then read back your copy and then think about how you can just make your call to actions a little bit more interesting. You don't need them at the end all the time. You know, they can be interspersed throughout the copy really naturally. And I think that's one thing that people forget is, you know, that they tend to have the big call to action at the end, like, do you want to work with me? Click here. What you can have is have more subtle ones. That's where your micro copy comes through throughout your, you know, whether it's your sales page, whether it's your home page, that allows people, gives the user that power to explore things on their terms.
Yeah, and I think that's you're so right, because I think that's true with when you've got a blog and you've got other articles that are related to a topic. Don't necessarily dump them all at the bottom of the article, because you can't assume that people are making it to the end of that article to then discover that you've got something else on a similar topic that's also of interest. So I always tell clients and help clients with their copy in terms of interspersing them where relevant. And you mentioned testimonials. Again, intersperse them into your copy. Don't just dump them at the bottom, or have them on like a testimonials page but nowhere else on the website, for example. So trying to make that page experience, all of the pages across your website, as interesting as possible by breaking it up into sections, having those call to actions, I think is you know, good practice, really.
Yeah, I love the tool Hotjar. I know there's other ones that people can use, but Hotjar is really great. And you know, I ask clients to plug it into their existing website so we can watch how people, how they,
Yeah, you can watch people literally using your site, can't you, and see where they get stuck and where they click. And
exactly,
yeah,
because you know, through the copywriting process, that should help guide then the design as well. And we say, you know, copy and design work hand in hand. So yeah, that's a really awesome tool. It's free. So you can plug it in and watch what people do. And I actually quite enjoy it because I'm a bit sad.
But I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was what tools would you recommend, if any? We've already touched on AI tools, ChatGPT, etc. I mean, do you vouch for those, or would you kind of say they're a great starting point if you're getting stuck, or would you actually be more leaning towards try to avoid them if you can, go with your own words as a starting point? Or how would you kind of approach that, and what other tools
Yeah, I
might you
think,
recommend?
yeah, as a copywriter, I suppose it's a very complex issue, ChatGPT. I will say, though, for many people, it makes copywriting a lot more accessible and creating copy for their website a lot more accessible. And you know what? That is only a really good thing. Depending on who you are, is it, and your personality and how you enjoy using technology is really whether you should use it or not. I think that's very much like if you're somebody that enjoys sitting down and using actual tools to generate things, and you're more of like a, you know, techie kind of person, then you're going to enjoy prompting. And that, I think that's when you need to be able to engineer really good prompts to be able to get ChatGPT to create good copy for you to a certain level. I think there's always a level of human refinement. You can never just kind of take.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah.
That is my one rule, is if you're going to use it, just please have an element of human refinement. ChatGPT gets things wrong. AI gets things wrong. The biggest issue, I think, is it gives you too much. And you can tell it to cut stuff down. And I think if you're in tune with AI and you're using it for other elements of your business, then absolutely, like you'll feel comfortable using it, then yes, use it. If you're not, if you're more of a not really into it yet, or maybe you're just trying it, then that's when I would advise maybe the more traditional approach of having a go, but have a go with a template. So like the template that we created together, I think a template is an absolute great kind of middle ground. In fact, I've actually had clients that have used both. So they've used the template and then they've used the prompts within the template to help them generate their copy. And then they've had the human editing element at the end.
Yeah.
And then another big tip in terms of like getting started and just getting some words out there is take the writing element out of it and like sketch out your copy, work out what's going to go where, what headings are going to go there. Start right at the top. Don't think about every single word having to be right straight away. So if you're somebody that wants to write it yourself and lean into that, that's where I would start, is just simply get a pen and paper and scribble some ideas down. Imagine what heading goes there, what goes in the hero, what's your main heading. Have fun with it, play around with it. Think of it as more of a visual task than having to stare at a blank Google Doc, because there is, even as a copywriter, there is no worse feeling than opening up a blank Google Doc.
Yeah, that flashing cursor, it can be very
Oh,
overwhelming.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, getting something down. I think it goes back to your point you made earlier on, in the sense of breaking it down by page, arguably, but giving yourself enough time to really think through what each page needs to strategically provide the visitor in terms of the information that they're going to need to understand. And I think all of this stems back to understanding your ideal client, who it is that you're actually trying to attract and convert with your copy and your website, and thinking about what they might need to know, what they might not already appreciate or understand about your service, what they might misunderstand, and all of those things. So it's all marketing essentially is fundamentally all about your ideal client and understanding them. So yeah, I think certainly in the copy sense, you need to really break that down, don't you, and understand what they need.
Yeah, and the templates that we did together and the templates that I do generally take you through that. There's three main stages that I talk about, and it's attract, engage, convert. If you can get those main three things right on your website and through your website copy, that is strategically the best way to nurture someone through from being, landing on your website to actually sending an inquiry. And essentially the attract bit is about hooking them in. Engage bit is like, let's keep them in a conversation. Let's make them feel at home. Let's make them feel happy, excited, that they're in the right place. And then the convert bit is giving them the right bits of information, the things that they need to know and feel reassured about in order to kind of take that extra step, whether that's filling out a contact form, sending you an email, making that bit crystal clear. So that template takes you through that process. And I think that is where, if you're coming at an AI tool, just asking AI to write you copy, AI will spit out sales copy, but unless you really exactly explicitly tell it, it doesn't necessarily do that strategy side of things. It doesn't think through it like that, and also think through it with the design. So I think that's where you can fall down with AI.
Yeah, no, there's so much potential with these tools. Like you say, it's a great leveler. It's a marketing assistant essentially,
Yes.
and so it's very exciting for the photography industry to be able to, improve copy that
Yeah.
may previously have not been that strong. But obviously, yeah, avoid the pitfalls of, not editing it to your brand voice and all the things we've talked about, changing it so that it is tailored to you. And yeah, use it wisely, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think at the time of recording this, AI has been around a while now, so people aren't making the mistakes as often. I'm seeing on social media kind of far less cringy, clearly written with AI type copy that I saw, some time back. And it was just so obvious it wasn't, written
Yeah.
by that person. So I think everyone's learning, aren't they, to use
100%.
these
Yeah.
tools and kind of get the better outputs from
Absolutely.
them. And ultimately, I think you would argue that, strong copy will help with that conversion of your ideal clients and lead to more inquiries and sales. So this stuff is really important to nail. And of course, all these tips you've been sharing have been super useful, hopefully, for those listening and watching. So thank you ever so much, Zoe, for your guidance here. It's been really fun to chat. And Of course, we've collaborated before. We're talking about collaborating again in the future. So people interested in all things PR, SEO, copywriting, the kind of topics that Zoe and I both specialise in, watch this space because more will be coming soon. But thanks ever so much, Zoe, for your time today. It's been brilliant chatting with you.
Thank you, Zoe.